Hi, I'm Melanie Gauss, and I'm a former teacher, and I'm also a writer with articles published in the Orlando Sentinel. And I'm here tonight to kick off Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month with three incredible daughters of Vietnam. And we would like to also thank the Asian Author Alliance for hosting us. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our panelists. And the first incredible lady that I'd like to introduce is Amy Lee. And Amy was born in Vietnam and immigrated to the United States in 1980 at the age of 5 with her mother and her cousin. Her family was among hundreds of thousands of boat people who fled Vietnam after the fall of Saigon. They were sponsored to Seattle, Washington, and made a life for themselves in the Pacific Northwest. Amy graduated from Western Washington University with a degree in sociology and worked in the technology and telecommunications sector for 20 years. After her mother's death in February of 2017, Amy left her corporate career to write her debut novel, Snow in Vietnam, as a tribute to her mother's heroic decision to flee Vietnam after the fall of Saigon. And today, Amy is a full-time writer living in Oklahoma with her husband and son. Her Snow trilogy is a trilogy of historical and women's fiction novels based on her family's life that are available through independent booksellers and online retailers. So Amy, when not writing, volunteers a lot. She volunteers at the Care Center, a child advocacy center. And she also serves as the president of the Oklahoma City Writers Incorporated. She's a congenital heart defect warrior and Vietnam survivor. Now, our next incredible lady is Leah Tran. And Leah Tran is an ethnic Chinese former boat person refugee from Vietnam. She is a Villanova University graduate with a bachelor's degree in chemistry, a female scientist turned successful entrepreneur and business owner in the greater Philadelphia region, where she called home for 35 years. In 2015, Leah and her husband headed to Florida to plunge into their next chapter of being empty nesters, exploring their new passions and purposes. Leah had brought her story to the TEDx stage and then revealed her harrowing journey in her first book, I Did Not Miss the Boat, Memoir of a Vietnam refugee. She delivers her powerful message of courage and hope during challenging times in her keynote speeches to inspire her audience to find opportunities in the midst of adversity. She has broken more than one glass ceiling and continues to do so, and to impact others with God's given privilege of being a free American citizen. Leah believes your story is extraordinary, and you have the power to change the narrative. Our third lady, incredible lady, is Kim Delavet. Kim was Southwest Airlines' first corporate community affairs manager, responsible for supporting the national Asian American and Pacific Islander community. Throughout her 24-year career with Southwest, she focused on educational and economic development, led outreach efforts to support human trafficking awareness and disaster response. She also worked to preserve culture, heritage, and historic communities. She is especially passionate about making a difference in the lives of future leaders, from mentoring students to supporting efforts that help youth become civically engaged and take pride in their cultural identity. Kim's work won recognition within the nationwide AAPI community, and she's been profiled frequently in ethnic and mainstream media. Kim was born in Saigon, Vietnam, and fled in April 1975 at age 2. She and her older brother were raised by an adoptive family in Pensacola, Florida. To commemorate the 40th anniversary of the fall of Saigon, her life story was chronicled in a joint project with StoryCorps and PBS called First Days, now part of the Library of Congress. She received a History Channel Award for an oral history she created on her refugee experience and was one of a handful of immigrants profiled in a national curriculum developed for school children. Kim graduated cum laude with a BA in communications and a minor in political science from Loyola University of New Orleans. She and her husband Peter enjoy traveling the world with their 12-year-old son, James. So welcome, ladies.
Thank you, Melanie.
Much, Melanie.
So I'd like to ask you, on April 30th, 1975, how old were you and where were you? What was going on with your family at the time? Would you like to start, Leah?
Sure. Well, I was 12. April 30th was a really chaotic day, and it's just another day for me, but the whole world was turning upside down. And I remember that people running out in the street cheering, and my dad was one of those many people, because peace is finally at last, right? After 30 some years of internal civil war, and he's just thinking that we're going to go socialist. Well, he was offered a chance to jump onto the helicopter with his boss, which is a colonel he served under at that time. But because my dad had migrated from China to Vietnam when he was 3, so it took him a long time to build up to where he was. And he was like, there's no way I'm going to go to another country and start it all over again. So he was happy, and a lot of people was happy. I, on the other hand, didn't know much. I just carry on with my 12 years old life. I have 3 younger siblings that I care under at the time. And I'm like a second in command with my mom, so I didn't really do much. And it took me like a year or so afterward to feel the sting of not being in a democratic country anymore. And I didn't speak Vietnamese until like 8 or 9 years old. So that's how much of a bubble that we are. And my dad didn't speak Vietnamese until he was 36. Until he was drafted to the Navy, to the military. So yeah, we were completely isolated in a sense.
Wow.
Wow. Kudos to your dad, though, for learning another language.
Yes.
I'm not sure about kudo. He was forced to.
Okay,
Oh,
well.
my goodness.
And he learned most of the curse word instead of in prison. In prison, that's what you learn.
Yeah.
So.
True.
But nevertheless, he become really he spoke Vietnamese very well once we left the country, and yeah, that's part of what I remember as a 12 years old. But I remember a whole lot more a few years after that.
Well, while my sister Lee was 12, I was 9 months old when Saigon fell, and so I was just a little itty bitty, and it looks like we're both born the year of the tiger, which is kind of
Yes.
That was an interesting time because that was when my mom and my dad separated, actually, and I'm the only child. My father actually had another family. He had an American family, and which is not uncommon back in those days to have, multiple wives. And so when Saigon fell, he went back to the United States with his American wife and child. And it was just my mom and me, the two of us scraping by. We did have extended family. I had an aunt and an uncle that were alive, and my cousins. And so my mom went back to our hometown of Gia Vinh in the Mekong Delta, and we ended up staying with them for many years until we finally made it out of the country.
Wow.
Oh my goodness, Amy. So I was 2.5 years old living in Saigon, and my 10-year-old brother and three young cousins. The oldest was 17. We fled Saigon just a few days before the fall. It was actually April 25th. I later found out the date. And no parents. So we were able to actually get sponsored by an American man that I later have found more information about. But that day I don't remember, since I was only 2.5, but my brother and cousins remember. And I'm actually still unearthing the story for my memoir that I'm just started. And but it was a day that forever changed my life. I never saw my Vietnamese mother again.
Oh my goodness. Wow. So you guys had incredible beginnings. My goodness.
Yeah, and I want to also say that, at that time for me, because I was born with a congenital heart defect, my mother was told that I wouldn't live past the age of 5. So having a sick child in war-torn Vietnam, finding out that her husband had another family and then they left, you can only imagine how strong she had to, and how quickly she had to grow up, right? How strong she had to be. But there's one thing that I have learned through all this is that the Vietnamese people, or the Hoa people, we're all just very resilient, and we have to do what we have to do to stay alive. It's been in our history for centuries.
Your mother must have been very brave. Wow.
Yeah. Hence the book.
Yes. Now, what were some of the misconceptions that you had about the war? I know here in America we have many misconceptions. Most Americans my age and younger don't really understand the Vietnam War. So what were your misconceptions, and what do you think the misconceptions of Americans might be?
Well, I'll just say that, growing up mostly in the United States, where I came here when I was 5 years old, I didn't understand anything about the war. I didn't even feel like I was Vietnamese, because you had to quickly assimilate into the American culture to survive. So I've always been asked, what do you feel about the war? What do you know about it? And I had nothing to say. My misconceptions were really like, okay, the war ended, everybody just resumed their life, went back to normal. The veterans came back to their country and started their life. The locals did too back in Vietnam. And I just didn't realize that all this trauma and all this baggage came with them, and so it wasn't a normal life that you resume after a war like that.
I can echo that. Growing up, I was really ashamed of being Vietnamese. And again, I don't remember the war, but growing up, there was a stigma of the war and shame around it. And so in class, I was the only Asian person. And so that was really hard growing up for me.
Well, for me, I've got a lot of mixed feeling, because I was old enough to understand what's going on. Out of a sudden, things change. School curriculum change. All the stuff that I learned from school now is like the opposite sides. Is I have to relearn things, and then Chinese was reduced, so there are more Vietnamese education than Chinese, and then everything's got cut off. So everything seems like really awful for me, that I have to jump in and take responsibility now, because the maid is no longer in service. So I sort of like picking up everything that the maid was doing. So I was hand washing the whole entire family's clothes every day. I have to help my mom cook and cleans, and then learn everything. So for me, I had a lot of resentment. Not at the time, I didn't understand, because you are in the circumstances, you just do whatever you need to do to get things moving. But much later in life, I felt like my childhood sort of like being robbed away, and I have bestowed a lot of responsibility that I didn't ask for. War teaches you a lot of things that children don't anticipate, but They have to leap and grow and learn. And that's where I found that from 12 to 16 years old, it was a really dramatic change in my life. And then it continued to change as I get to the refugee camp and trying to get to America to assimilate not only my life, but also lead my family so they can, get used to the new life of in a new land. So it was a lot of mixed feeling for me. And it take me 40 years to actually look back and say that I was proud of what I did, but it wasn't easy.
Lee, were you the only one that did the trading in your family because you were
Pretty
the
much,
one to get
pretty
away
much.
with it?
Yeah, pretty much.
Sure. You're the oldest.
But now I feel glad that I dig into that feeling and make peace with it. So writing a book is a huge therapeutic thing for me to go back and to understand that no parent's gonna want to put your children into that kind of thing, but it has to be done. It has to be done.
You did whatever it took to survive.
Yeah. Yeah, it taught me a lot.
And that's what matters, survival, right?
Yeah. And you learn a lot more when you were put in those kind of circumstances. So I consider it's a privilege.
So what did you all learn that was a surprise as you did the research for your writing? Now I know, Kim, that you're in the process of writing. Would you like to start out this question for us?
Sure. Going back to dark places has been really challenging. It's taken a lot out of me, more than I thought that it would. And those dark places consist of times that were hard for me in my elementary school years and my high school years. And now I'm just learning more about my whole refugee experience fleeing Vietnam. Now that I have the time to really research, I've been looking at articles and videos and pictures of refugee camps and retracing my steps. And it's been really emotional for me. It's been a lot to process and unpack. And there are days where I'm just like, okay, I'm just not going to do anything but take a long bath and just pamper myself, because it is a lot for me to learn my past for the first time. And so I didn't expect for the journey to be so emotional, but I'm willing to take it, and I want to take it, and I want to write and share my stories so others can hopefully heal.
One thing I want to say, Kim, it's going to be powerful because you take the time to reflect. I want to say that I curled up in bed for almost 3 months, crying, nothing but crying. Going back was not easy.
No.
It's necessary. It's a healing process.
Absolutely.
And there's going to be a lot of dark days, but knowing that you can call me anytime. We're going to walk through this together. And I want to say that it is so powerful to go back, because then you feel like you understand a lot more than, I didn't have any surprise factors. I have more of an aha factor.
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
I have more of, oh, that's why this happened, and oh, that's why, things happen like this. I envy a lot of history from my parents, my grandparents, and even for the country that didn't take us in, Malaysia, Indonesia, why they refused the refugees. There's a lot of things that I read on Google's and things that I dug out, clips, documentation clips, that it was so valuable. And watching those things really opened eyes for me in so many levels that make me feel like all the dots start to connecting. and it feels like, you start seeing the picture instead of little pieces.
Oh, sorry.
So I just thank you, and I appreciate you walking the journey with me, and the encouragement, because it's really scary and it's really painful and it's really yeah, it's a lot. And but I'm really grateful for the community that we have as writers, as well as Asian Americans and Vietnamese American women, and it's our collective story and histories that we have to voice.
Yeah, I think one common thread here among three of us too, because we have parents that we lost, and the mourning process is difficult. So I mourn for my dad who passed away 30 some years ago. So I understand the pain that it's almost like an unfinished business, like didn't have a final conversation. It's no closure. So I'm sure Amy can share some of her feeling too.
Yeah, so Lee and Kim, they're choosing to write memoirs, and when I wrote my 3 books, I chose to fictionalize. They are historical and women's fiction novels for a reason. It's because I didn't have all the pieces. My mom, like most of our family, they don't talk about it, and it's a very traumatic experience. And so whenever I tried to ask questions, it was always deflected. And so a lot of my story had to come from interviews from other refugees and other Vietnamese, or people of the Vietnamese diaspora, also war veterans that came home and had to deal with their own trauma and PTSD to a country that didn't want them either. So, the process of researching and learning about your history is pretty jarring, because you go from not knowing anything to suddenly getting overwhelmed because you know so much. And for the longest time, I didn't understand why my father wasn't in the picture, and then I found out. And so that was hard. Losing my mom was very hard, because growing up, it was just the two of us. She had to scrape everything together to keep me alive, really. Because not only were we in the middle of in a communist country, but we were, I was dying. So yeah, I remember all the things that my family has done for me, and I'm just so grateful to be here, grateful to be with the community that I have found. I can just go on and on, but I think maybe we should go on to the next question.
Okay. Yes. But one thing I think is really fantastic and incredible about you ladies is that you do lift each other up. And Leah, you are just such a bright, shining personality that, and I just love the way that you're just so supportive. I think that's fantastic.
Yes.
Would you say, in the face of and rise of the recent anti-Asian hate crimes since the COVID pandemic, that you're more afraid to be Asian or more proud of your heritage? And this time, let's start with Amy, if that's okay.
Sure. Just recently, I had a breaking point, and I posted on social media of me crying because I was so upset, so sad that all this anti-Asian hate crime was coming to light. And it's been there. It's just now being more and more covered in the media. And it took a lot out of me, because I'm not an activist. I consider myself an introvert. I rise to the occasion when I have to be and put on my best social extroverted self. So it took a lot of courage for me to just speak out against this whole thing. And since then, I feel like I've been heard, And since then, I feel like my brothers and sisters, my allies, they've all come together. There's still a lot of them out there who don't know what's going on, but the ones who have stepped up has really made me feel empowered. And in that sense, I feel very proud to be Asian American, because we are now starting to find our voice and be the voice for the generation before us and for the children, our future. So we're teaching them to speak up and be strong, and just like our forefathers and our family before us. And it's important to amplify our voices together and stand up to hatred and racism and bigotry. So very proud to be Asian American.
And what do you think, Leah?
I think that a lot of Asian women, particularly, we were not taught to rock the boat, not speaking up, just be submissive. And I'm always shy away from politics and from religions and from confrontational conversation. But ever since that I choose to become a writer, an author, a speaker, I have to pick a platform to stand for. And it's not better platform is to represent your own skin. And I think the reason I also write this book, because I want people to know we came here trading our lives for our freedom. And it's something that is really precious for us. And we work really hard to earn that. So don't hate us. We didn't do anything wrong. We did nothing but contribute. And we want a good society. We train our children to be a good society. And I have to say that a lot of young folks really have a lot of courage because they are raised in America. They don't afraid to speak up. And they give me a lot of lessons. Like, I have to be brave to speak up because my children are braver than me. My younger generation are more vocal than me. Why am I sitting in one place and hoping for it to go away like we always did in Vietnam? So this is America. We do have a voice, and I'm so glad to find friends who support us and allies and, Asian authors. Together we can make a strong voice. We can create a difference, and we can make people understand that our background is not threatened to them. We didn't bring the virus. We are not the virus. Hate is the virus.
Right.
So, yeah, I'm hoping that people listen to our stories, to all the different Asian in different part of the Asia who come here to America. We just want to be loved and accepted, just like you, just like everyone. Most of the Asian out there and my friends, if you're white, black, whatever color you are, we need to all stand up together and define hate.
Right. And what do you think, Kim?
I again echo both Lee and Amy, their sentiments. I attended an anti-Asian hate rally in March in my community and brought my son and my husband as well. And I couldn't have been more proud. I couldn't have been more proud of being Vietnamese American, Asian American, and having my son see our community standing up in solidarity, and really seeing for the first time that he has a community that he can always fall back on as he grows as well. And I really try to talk to young adults today to share my personal journey, so they can learn the importance of being proud of your heritage. And it's really important to never be ashamed of who you are. And when I attended that rally, all the emotions and the pain and suffering that I had overcome throughout my life pretty much poured out as I was screaming, "Stop Asian hate." And it's really terrible that our country is so divided, and that race is dividing us. And I just, pray that we can move forward as a country and heal and learn about each other and be accepting and respectful. And I just pray for that and have hope for that.
Right. We all hope and pray for that. Share with us your writing journey, how it affected you as you uncovered parts of your heritage and history. I mean, we touched on that in previous questions, but if you guys would like to shed a little bit more light about how you did your research, how you unearthed everything from the past, that would be really interesting. Who would like to start? Would you like to start this time, Leah?
I'll go. Yeah.
Okay.
For me, it's the journey of appreciation for my parents. The book that I wrote, it's a tribute for my dad. And he has been through a lot, PTSD, in his whole life that he had no idea. I had no idea. So was my mom. But my dad passed away when he was 50, barely 7 years when we get to America. And that's when I felt like I really was crossing the ocean by myself. Because when we left Vietnam, we had a whole family. I didn't have to worry much. He's my roof. But when he passed away, I felt like everything was falling on me. So I appreciate him a lot. And I also appreciate my mom. All the resentment was clearing up. I appreciate her past, her childhood, everything that she had to endure. And it opened up a lot of understanding, a lot of gratitude. And it feels really good that I went through that journey. It's very necessary for me, and I felt a lot lighter. Things are not clogged up, and not just that, but my niece and my son, they all love the story and they want to find out more about their own grandparents' journey, history. So it is so good. My son is 26 now, so he has a much better understanding and appreciation. So I think that was a win-win for all three generations, for me, my parents, and my son. So it was a really rewarding journey for me.
That sounds like an important journey.
Yes. I think that's a legacy that I'm leaving behind. And my dad have left his legacy. He saved my family, and he saved 490 some people on that boat that he navigated, and he was a project manager. And so he did a lot, but he never boasted. He never tell anybody. He just, he's just so good that it took me that many years to understand. So I felt really good writing that story.
There's definitely something special in the relationship between dads and daughters.
Absolutely. It's very, very important. I think all girls, all boys, they want to please their father. They know that their mother always loved them unconditionally, so they just want to impress their father. And if you look around, every single one of us, I think, I don't want to say all, but I would say 95%, everybody is doing things to impress their father. And yeah, and this is part of a way that I'm trying to impress my father, even though he passed away 30 some years ago.
And what about you, Kim?
Well, the research that have found most inspirational, I think, has been talking to former classmates and hearing their stories of their parents who were Vietnam vets, and listening to how the Vietnam War was never really talked about in their household, but they were raised by the war, and listening to their hurt and pain, and just the other side of the story here. You know, we were both not talking about the Vietnam War when we were elementary school, and I've just learned that there's this trauma that our generation is dealing with as as we are raising our own children, and there's still so much pain and shame around the war that I feel like there needs to be a collective healing and the ability to be able to talk about the war intergenerationally. And so I kind of have an idea for another book, and just sharing our stories and listening to each other and healing together is something that I've really have felt that's needed still in our country.
I do understand the whole issue of not talking about the war, because I was a child at that time, and I don't remember it being talked about very much. It was something adults talked about, but not something that we as children were allowed to hear. We were never included in those conversations, so we didn't understand anything about it. And so I understand what you're saying about that difficulty in talking about the war.
My writing journey, I quit my corporate job. I left a 6-figure salary and the cushions and perks and all that.
That was brave.
20 years in the industry, and when my mom passed away, it was devastating. My world crashed, and I quit my job to mourn her death and reset my life a little bit, try to figure out, what I want to do with my life. And so I actually went through the process of, joining a bunch of writing associations, immersing myself into that writing community, taking workshops and modules and what have you before I actually started my writing. And in that process, even though I tore down my office and everything and got it ready to go, I found out that as much as I want to be a plotter, because in my life I was planning everything, when it comes to writing and the creative process, I was very much the pantser, and I just flew by the seat of my pants, let the story take me wherever it was going to take me, let the characters take me wherever. And it took 2 years to write my book, and I learned so much from the writing community. And what I love about this community is we help each other, we lift each other up, we promote each other's works. The market's saturated, but you don't really see that competition, thou shalt not covet your fellow authors. And it really is true. Because all of our stories and our writing style is different, and our audience and platform is different. So that's kind of the beauty, I think, of being a writer, is you get to have characters that talk to your head at 3 o'clock in the morning. You get to make your husband cook for you and you don't have to cook. But, it's just the writing journey itself was very therapeutic. And when I finished the first one, luckily the readers really wanted a sequel. So I wrote my sequel, and then they were so demanding that they wanted a third one. And but yeah, I wrote my trilogy, and the third one only took me 1 month to write because I just wanted it. I wanted it done. I wanted to move on to the next project, but that's kind of.
And she's a super, super creative writer. I mean, she's so rich, very, very rich. Her imagination is just incredible, this woman. And I think she must do a lot of research because some of her lingo, I have to look it up. It's like, wow. Like, GI was talking a certain thing and she described the scene. It's almost like I was there. It just seems like I'm watching a movie. So it's incredible, creative.
Thank you. And I'll put a plug in for Lee's memoir too. I read that thing in three days. I Did Not Miss the Boat was an amazing memoir. And my heart just melted because Lee put everything in those pages. You can feel the tears and the blood and the sweat and everything else that goes in there. So if you're looking for a good memoir, please get Lee.
Thank you. Well, I didn't come alone. I brought my friend with me. The 16 years old girl that I shut her down and put in the closet for a long time. Now I like to take her everywhere I go so she can see the world and be proud of herself.
And you should be proud of yourself. I mean, that's an incredible accomplishment. Incredible accomplishment, ladies. That really is.
I think we all have our journey that we didn't appreciate until we actually sit and reflect on what we've been to and our parents been through. It is so worth it, and I encourage people, if they trying to walk away, which I did for a while, for the longest time. I'm trying to walk away from my own heritage too. I stopped speaking Chinese. I stopped speaking Vietnamese. I stopped speaking, doing things that my family always do, just so I can be American. And I felt like I have to do that in order to give me that open space so I can learn new stuff. Because, a lot of time you were raised in an old generation and you have a lot of ritual. You have a lot of things that you do, but you didn't understand why you're doing it. Mm-hmm. And I have to say that I am not going to have Asian friends. I'm not going to have Asian culture. I'm just going to walk away and learn things like I should be doing when I was a teenager when I came here. And it's a good space in order to, be able to find yourself again. You got to know who you are. And that's what I think, I think your next question, since I'm at it, I'm going to just jump right into identity. It was really, really hard for me to identify myself because I didn't know who I was. Going from very shallow roots of both Chinese, Vietnamese, I feel like it's a automatic thing for me when people say that where you're from. It's like, oh, I'm from Vietnam, but I'm Chinese. It's like there's always the underlying sentence like right next to it because I'm not Vietnamese. So I have to clarify that. But what does that mean? I don't ever step foot to China until 3 years ago. So how much of a Chinese I am? So I am shameful that I'm not really fully Chinese, but then I'm not Vietnamese. And I'm not, I felt like I call myself a limbo generation. I'm such a limbo of everything, have buckets of good of nothing for the longest time. That's how I felt. And identity was, and plus, if you read my book, I don't want to be a spoiler alert, but my age has been altered. So now I am in the group that I'm not belong to, and my mind is different. So there's many struggle of self-identity and self worth, and it's just a whole lot of things that I didn't understand. So that was tough. That was really tough for at least 25 years until I become a mom, and then I felt a little more confident because I have to. Somebody else is relying on me, so I have to be more confident and learn from there. But yeah, it's a struggle. It's a struggle.
That would be a struggle. I think anytime I've met people who have a mix of backgrounds, then it seems to be an identity struggle. And then with changing cultures, with as different as the cultures are, I can see where that could contribute to the identity crisis. Well, my dad likes to say that here in America, none of us are pure blood anything. We are all mutts.
Mhm.
So that's what we're supposed to be. So Amy, tell us about your identity.
So, it's interesting. When I came to the United States at the age of 5, I came in March of 1980. And then in August of 1980, I collapsed and was rushed to the hospital where I had open heart surgery. And that saved my life. It's like I woke up a new person. I came out of that OR a totally different person. My first English word was 7-Up. I was speaking English, and I didn't know that I was not American. I didn't know that I was not from the US, So growing up, I had a very good childhood. It wasn't until I left all of my white friends in Seattle and went to Orange County, California when I was 13 years old. And there were a lot of Asians there, which actually overwhelmed me. And then I was confused. Am I Vietnamese and Asian, or am I American and Caucasian? I mean, that's how I felt. I even changed my name from Tweety to Amy to blend in. But I was very, very confused with my identity. And not having a father in my life was also, they always say that home is where you hang your hat. And I only had half a home, in the sense that I only had just my mom to hang my hat on. And so when my mom remarried and I had a stepdad, all of a sudden there's a parental figure, an authoritative figure. During my teen formative years, it was a huge identity crisis for me. And I actually had a couple of meltdowns, and I share that in my third book about growing up in Orange County as an Asian, but not feeling Asian. But in the sense that they also grounded me, and that's how I was able to kind of circle back and understand that I had roots, and understand, those roots are there for a reason, and I needed to embrace it. So.
Right. And what about you, Kim?
Yes, I grew up in an all Caucasian house and neighborhood and school and church. So at one point when I was little, I thought I was white because that's all I saw. And I didn't really see, Asian faces in TV, of course. And I just, again, I was just really ashamed of being different and Asian, Vietnamese American. And so it really took a Broadway play when I saw Miss Saigon in New York for the first time in college. I was a junior in college. Parts of the storyline play out. I immediately started just to bawl, and I realized that I didn't know who I was, and I had denied my heritage and my identity for all my upbringing. And so I turned to my boyfriend, who's my husband now, and said, it's time for me to go back home, go back to Vietnam. And so after I graduated from college, took all of my savings and bought the ticket to Hanoi, actually, and spent a month backpacking. And then finally went to Ho Chi Minh and hired a driver. And I'll share all this in my book, but my journey. But it really took a Broadway play for me to want to even go back to Vietnam and see my roots. And then lo and behold, I find my Vietnamese family after 20 years that I didn't expect to find. I didn't realize I even had relatives still alive. So, and that changed the whole trajectory of my life, excuse me. And so identity was a real struggle for me for the majority of my upbringing, and up into my 30s, really.
Wow. That is an incredible journey. My goodness. So, what is one piece of advice that you would give to the younger generation who feel alone or dealing with mental health or identity crises of their own? Amy, would you like to start?
I would say, if anything that you've learned today is that you're not alone. I'm sitting here, virtually, but I'm looking at beautiful faces in front of me who share similar stories or backgrounds, or if anything, share the same pain. So I would say to those, to our younger generation, that it's not a stigma to have a mental health issue. We all have mental health issues. The trauma is passed on from generation to generation, and it dictates the decisions that we make and the people that we marry and how we raise our children, and it just snowballs from there. So I want them to understand that, if they feel like there's no one that they can talk to, please reach out to any of us. Reach out to me, because I feel like, a lot of us have been there in our own pain. It's different pains maybe, but seek the help, speak out. And I feel like the more you talk about it, even if you just write it down, whatever form, poetry, narrative, that you're going to find that every little word that you put down is going to be one step closer to healing.
Writing can be very therapeutic, I think, for a lot of people. So, Kim?
I was just going to say, absolutely reach out to community members, reach out to your pastor, reach out to your best friend's parents. I mean, if I hadn't reached out for help when I was younger, I don't know if I'd be here today. There are resources, and don't ever feel like you're alone, and know that you have the strength to overcome, but ask for help. And help comes in many forms, and it doesn't necessarily always have to be your immediate family. That's okay. Definitely reach out to friends, neighbors, just anyone who you feel like you can, talk to and that you can trust. And for me, if it hadn't been for a lot of community members and my church, like I said, I don't know if I would be here, and I certainly wouldn't be the same person. And spent a lot of time in therapy as well. So, it's important to just ask for help.
And Leah?
Yeah. And I want to concur that. I think that right now that we have a lot of Facebook group that you can find people in the same background, supportive. I recently found two groups. It's called like the Chinese dialect that I'm speaking from my own family. So that is fun to see, because there's so many people out there who are facing the same problem that most of us think that we are alone. We are not. And the second thing I would say is strike a dialogue. My book really brought me closer to my son and my niece, because they read the book and they were curious and they want to ask me more questions. So now we have a podcast between me and my son, and we're hoping that that dialogue will also trigger some sort of curiosity between other people and their parents and their children, because I felt like for the longest time, like we're the sandwich generation, right? We get bound by traditional culture, ritual from our parents, but then when we raise our children, they expect us to be Americanized, contemporary thinking. So we have to balance from both ends, and nothing better than open a conversation with your loved ones, because doing that, you will find out more of things. Like, I had no idea that my son was so surprised in so many factors that I take it for granted. I assumed that he would understand from all those things that I keep saying over the years, right? And he's like, no, Mom, I have no idea. So it is a healthy way to communicate with your family by asking questions. And by understanding it, you will appreciate a whole lot more than just assuming it. So for me, I think, reach out to community, form a group of alliance. I'm so glad that I found my sister from another mother in this group here. And, we all have pain. And it's so good to be able to share with people who've been through the similar journey. And we're never alone. So reach out to us. If you feel like you, at the end of the rope, you don't want to talk about it, don't hide the feeling. Talk about it, because it will get a whole lot better if you do talk about it.
You ladies are so encouraging and uplifting, and your journeys are just fascinating. So I can't wait to read all your stories, and I really hope that everyone who's listening to this will buy the books and read the stories, and hopefully that really does help everyone understand. The more we understand each other, the better.
Yeah, we want to be all inclusive. I think this May is really an opportunity. If you have an Asian friend, then talk to them. If you don't have an Asian friend, maybe make one.
Check in on them.
Check in on them. Absolutely, check in on them.
Yeah.
And thank you, ladies.
Thank you, Melanie.
Thank you for the opportunity.
And thank you.
Thank you for moderating.
Well, and thank you for all being my new friends.
Oh,
Yeah.
thanks.
Thank you.